Chapter 1. Karen, Queen of Ilium, stared up into the sky. For almost half a day, the tiny ship Argo was suspended and surrounded by substantial city-sized ships that were not native to her world. These ships appeared in the aftermath of their most significant victory against the armies of King Racamor at Mull Garden, Count Voslow's castle. Like unwanted relatives at a banquet, they seemed to demand what was rightfully theirs. Karen's hands instinctually went to her stomach, feeling her unborn child kicking within. She was almost due, and like all expecting mothers, could not help but associate current events with that of her child's future. The woman had never been so frightened. "Wizard?" Karen asked, taking her husband's hand. From the wizard there came no response. Jatel, king of Ilium, was as concerned as his beautiful wife. As king, he could not afford to project an unstable constitution. The man was terrified as he looked up at the alien vessels. Keith's hands pulled at his long beard, lost in profound thought. This was a game that was almost beyond his ability to play. If these mysterious visitors were indeed the Knowns of ancient lore, how could he stop them? The Known were said to be above all magics and sciences. Indeed, people almost worshipped them as gods. How could one outthink a god? A sign of activity came from the ships. A pinging noise filled the air, causing a slight discomfort within the ears.
"We are the Knowns. We have come back to take what was once ours. Live with us as subjects, or die."
The statement was not a verbalized form of communication, but more of a mental one, like the silent and mysterious voice heard in one's head when a decision is made. The statement was heard, however, and was frightenedly understood. Then, nothing. The ships started to turn clockwise, slowly. A small hum filled the air, and within seconds all became accustomed to the sensation. Thousands upon thousands of windows opened up within the ships as if to give the occupants inside a chance to see their new home. Karen was not going to have it. Not after achieving so much. Not after learning to live as a woman, having once been a man. Not after finally discovering the joys of love. Not after achieving a glorious victory against overwhelming odds. This was not fair. Massive blasts of fire and steam began to eject from the alien ships as they continued their slow turning. As far as they could all see, each vessel, which seemed to fill most of the sky, mimicked each other in their actions. Keith calmly suggested that it was a means of communication, but the wizard was only guessing. If one were to associate a dark ship's description, that word would be cold. Dark, challenging, and obsidian in nature, callous hands built these vessels. Unlike the Argo, which had been constructed by Keith with love and dedication, these ships were only created to serve. Circular in shape, oval in height, more decks appeared within the middle of the things than seen on their sides. A ditch or dug-out hangar, possibly a cargo hatch entry, separated the top and bottom superstructures. At no time did the bright gleam of the suns touch the skin of the ships. It was as if the light were absorbed instead of merely enjoyed. These were terrible and ungodly machines. Jatel and Karen approached the wizard. The older man stood at his ship's wheel thinking and rethinking plans of attack. This was evident by the increasing wrinkles of worry projecting from his tattooed forehead. The tattoo had its history. As once explained within their initial encounter, Keith's markings resembled the true nature of the universe. 3 rings of galaxies and planetary movements. The rings resembled gold, silver, and copper. They also represented the metaphysical, and any wizard worth his salt never ignored the spiritual. Each ring stood for the 3 layers of the universe: creation, existence, and destruction. Upon his final lesson, the mark of a wizard was placed on his forehead by his master. Keith wore the honor proudly. "I do not envy you your puzzle, wizard," Jatel stated, trying his best to look unmoved by surrounding events. It wasn't working. "This is a problem. We have been under enemy control for almost half a day, and there appears to be no escape." Karen shot her husband a concerned stare. Jatel quieted. "What do you want of us, wizard?" Karen asked, looking up at the ships. "Your Grace, I have absolutely no idea," Keith shrugged. "I am open to any suggestion, though." "Then we are prisoners?" Jatel asked, reaching for the hilt of his sword. "A prison is only a prison if there is no chance of escape, Your Majesty," the wizard barked, annoyed by the king's lack of faith in him. Jatel, if only to prove a point, stretched out his hands, walked to the center of the deck, and pantomimed their current situation. He showed the wizard that they were all surrounded. "There appears to be no escape." "Your Majesty, there is always escape. After all, we escaped from Torque, did we not?" At the mention of the dragon's name, Jatel humbled himself. Escaping the inner verse of a dragon's stomach was impossible. If Karen and Jatel had not the good fortune to encounter Keith and his incredible wooden ship inside of Torque, he knew that they would still be there. "Sir, I am sorry," Jatel bowed. "I am concerned." Keith's eyes softened. He understood. The humming noise from the ships stopped. Things turned remarkably calm. The skies became devoid of sound. "What is this?" the wizard asked. Small doors opened at the bottom of each ship. The actions were done smoothly and without so much as a squeak or noise. "What could it be?" Karen asked, looking up. "A welcoming party?" Jatel hoped. Keith shook his head to the negative. "To the gods, Your Majesty, I do not think so." Keith's eyes narrowed in the study. "It is my experience that most welcoming committees do not start their mission with a subjugating threat. No, this is an evil thing meant to destroy. Frankly, I fear our safety." Karen's eyes turned hard. She glared at the wizard. Keith shrugged. "It's always wise to prepare for the worst." As if on cue, several tiny metallic beings sped from the ship's underbellies. They looked like floating barrels. They held fiery red eyes located within one small metal-boxed head, continually searching for targets. Claw-like hands shot out from their sides, clamping down several times, giving the impression that they could produce great harm if contact were made. All seemed to be propelled by flames that endlessly sparked from their sides and bottom. "What are they?" Karen asked, marveling at them as they flew near. Jatel and Keith were not so impressed. "Wizard, I suggest some kind of action." Jatel withdrew his sword. "I believe that you may be correct, Your Majesty." Battle stations were called on the Argo. Chapter 2. The metal creatures assaulted the Argo like a swarm of insects. They were everywhere. From their bellies came a ray of concentrated light that was lethal as any arrow or cannon shot when contact was made with it. They buzzed up and down the ship, scanning everything that they could. They paused almost to the last in front of the substantial gas-filled balloon holding the vessel in place and seemed to be stuck between the thought of destroying it and complete fascination. With all their advanced science, Could they not understand the simplicity of lighter-than-air propulsion? Jatel and Keith were attacked, possibly because they were the only ones holding weapons. The wizard, spotting the metallic drones advancing toward his control levers, picked up a sword of his own, determined to defend the knowledge he contained within the confines of his ship. If in the wrong hands, the Argo would become a dangerous weapon. "Stay away from that, you monster!" the wizard yelled, striking with his sword. The drone responded fast, aiming a small metal stick at the wizard, shooting a ray of light, hitting his hand. In agony, Keith dropped his sword. He grabbed at his wound, marveling at the scorched flesh and pain. There was damage, but no blood. How was that possible? "Cauterization of the wound without a fire," the old man mumbled to himself. "Fascinating." Molly, Keith's lover, noticed that the wizard was injured. "No!" she shouted, running after the unfortunate drone. The vampire found her hearts filled with rage. As a woman, she loved and adored her man. Keith was kind and patient with her. Recovering from the pain and separation from her last lover, Endon, he made it a point not to compete with his sacred memory. Endon also happened to be Karen and Jatel's unfortunate son. She treasured these people more than she did her own undead life. The red-headed beauty shouted with rage. Molly flashed her fangs, leaping into the air. Making contact with the light metal being, she pried it from its axis and ripped it from its flight. The vampire landed on the wooden deck of the ship, carrying the mechanical device within her powerful arms. The drone clipped, chirped, and whined as it tried to free itself from the vampire's grip. "Good work, lass," Keith yelled, raising his arms in triumph. "Now be careful not to ruin it." Molly was not listening. Her eyes were focused on the wound the thing produced upon Keith's hand. She knew that to a wizard his hands were paramount. How could he conjure up his spells and do his scientific wonders if he could not use his hands? "You will harm no more," she shouted, raising the thing above her head. With its two arms flapping helplessly, the drone tried a final time to break free of the woman's maniacal grip. Blasting a wall of fire down, engulfing Molly's head, it hoped to gain temporary safety by the damage it caused. This would have been enough for any mortal woman, but Molly had the regenerative powers of the undead. Wounds meant nothing to her. The flames burnt away the woman's hair, boiling and ripping flesh from most of her face. Bone and bleeding muscles held what was left in place. Her fangs showed awkwardly, considering that her lips had been fried away with the attacker's fiery blast. Molly laughed. Karen screamed and found her hands reaching for her mouth in surprised horror. The queen and former Edosian knight did all that she could to keep from vomiting. The Argo wavered in the air, being assaulted by several beams of light coming from one of the invading ships. "The masters want their property back," Molly stated between burnt teeth. The woman's mouth exhaled steam and smoke. The drone was heard recharging its engines. Another wave of the fiery attack was being planned. Its mechanical head turned around to face Molly, recording and studying everything. The vampire did not like the cold and calculating glances she was getting from the thing. It was bent on destroying her. From the corner of her eyes, Molly noticed that Karen and Jatel escaped, heading into the depths of the ship. For this she was thankful. Ilium and Edocia had gone through enough horror and war to lose such guiding lights as those two. She was happy in the knowledge that her actions had given both enough time to seek shelter. "Now, my little friend, let's talk of death." Thrusting and throwing with all her undead might, the vampire